Hey guys, this is Allison from Allykatkreations. How are you? If you get anything from my work, a mic drop, an epiphany, a connect the dot, a new author to read, or a new book to explore, please consider supporting my work. It keeps me fed, my lights on, my electric, all that good stuff. The links will be in the description box below. And I want to thank everybody who has been very super supportive of keeping me alive in the last year. It's been very, very difficult. A little while ago, I just finished the Kabbalion. And I mentioned a book that I just have to. Okay, before I show this book, while in art school, 17 years ago, a little later than that, I was deep and heavy into existential philosophy. And one of my favorite philosophers is Arthur Schopenhauer. The condition of this book is grim, really grim. Coffee, linseed oil, paint, all kinds of stuff. It just took over this book. But I do readings from him time to time from different books because he's amazing. Today I'm going to read on thinking for yourself. What? No. Thinking for yourself? And then the other section I'm going to tackle. It's a little further on law and politics. Two good themes that we need in our world today. Really, we need these. And I'm just upstairs. Just go find the book. It's downstairs, and I didn't put. I mean, a lot of my books are away, and then some of them are tucked in things that I can get to. And I made sure I put my philosophy books in that spot. And I don't know why, but this is Arthur Schopenhauer from Essays and Aphorisms. And this is the section on thinking for yourself. As the biggest library, if it is in disorder, is not as useful as a small but well-arranged one. So you may accumulate a vast amount of knowledge, but it will be of far less value to you than a smaller amount if you have not thought it over for yourself. Because only through ordering what you know by comparing every truth with every other truth can you take complete possession of your knowledge and get it into your power. You can think about only what you know, so you ought to learn something. On the other hand, you can know only what you have thought about. Now you can apply yourself voluntarily to reading and learning, but you cannot really apply yourself to thinking. Thinking has to be kindled as a fire is by a drop, and keep going by some kind of interest in its object, which may be an objective increase or merely a subjective one. The latter is possible only with things that affect us personally, the former only to those heads who think by nature, to whom thinking is as natural as breathing, and these are very rare. That is why most scholars do so little of it. The difference between the effect produced on the mind by thinking for yourself and that produced by reading is incredibly great. So that the original difference, which made one head decide for thinking and another for reading, is continually increased. For reading forcibly imposes on the mind thoughts that are as foreign to its mood and direction at the moment of reading as the signet is to the wax upon which it impresses its seal. The mind is totally subjected to an external compulsion to think this or that for which it has no inclination and is not in the mood. On the other hand, when it is thinking for itself, it is following its own inclination, as this has been more closely determined either by its immediate surroundings or by some recollection or another. For its visible surroundings do not impose some single thought on the mind, as reading does. They merely provide it with occasion and matter for thinking the thoughts appropriate to its nature and present mood. The result is that much reading robs the mind of its elasticity, as the continual pressure of a weight does on a spring, that the surest way of never having any thoughts of your own is to pick up a book every time you have a free moment. The practice of doing this is the reason erudition makes most men duller and sillier than they are by nature and robs their writings of all effectiveness. They are Pope's words, forever reading, never to be read. It's interesting spin. Fundamentally, it is only our own basic thoughts that possess truth in life. For only these do we really understand through and through. The thoughts of another that we have read are crumbs for another's table, the cast off clothes of an unfamiliar guest. Reading is merely a surrogate for thinking for yourself. It means letting someone else direct your thoughts. Many books, moreover, serve merely to show how many ways there are of being wrong, and how far astray you yourself would go if you followed their guidance. You should read only when your own thoughts dry up, which will, of course, happen frequently enough, even to the best heads. But to banish your own thoughts so as to take up a book is a sin against the Holy Ghost. It is the deserting, untrammable nature to look at an herbarium or engravings of landscapes. It may sometimes happen that a truth and insight which you have slowly and laboriously puzzled out by thinking for yourself could easily have been found already written in a book. But it is 100 times more valuable if you have arrived by it thinking for yourself. For only then will it enter your thought system as an integral part and living member, be perfectly firm and consistent with it, and in accord with all its other consequences and conclusions, bear the hue, color, and stamp of your whole manner of thinking, and have arrived at just the moment it was needed. Thus it will lay and stay firm and forever lodged in your mind. This is a perfect application, indeed, explanation of Goethe's lines. Oh, it's in German. And I'm not going to attempt to slaughter the Germanic language. Sorry, guys. For the man who thinks for himself becomes acquainted with the authorities for his opinions only after he's acquired them and merely as a confirmation of them, while the book philosopher starts with his authorities, and that he constructs his opinions by collecting together the opinions of others. His mind then compares with that of the former as an automation compares with a living man. A truth that has merely been learnt adheres to us only as artificial limb, a false tooth, a wax nose does, or at most transplanted skin. But a truth won by thinking for ourself is like a natural limb. It only really belongs to us. That is what determines the difference between a thinker and a mere scholar. Now, asking yourselves, why is Allison reading such hopwash? Take the context of what Schopenhauer is expressing here and talking about the books. But now, fast forward it into the here and the now, as I do with a lot of these books that are written ages ago, right? Oh, bless you, Mama. She was sneezing. We get all this information. We get a lot of information instantaneous now on the internet. We listen to podcasts, we listen to a lot of people, and they go back into documents and they find their stuff and they're doing a lot of reading, right? But how do we know that that's not falsified, right? You have to go in and do your own discernment, right? I don't agree with all the books that I read in their philosophies or their theories or what they're trying to project. There's certain things in there that I definitely resonate with and other things I don't. And the same applies to you. And this is what he's trying to point out here. But obviously they didn't have the internet back in the 1800s. So books. But that's not to say not to read. It's just like going to art school and being inspired by Van Gogh. That's usually one of the very few go-tos for most people. Oh, I love his expressionism. Or Pablo Picasso, right? And they mimic with their own style their work. Is that being original? Is that really thinking for yourself, critically thinking for yourself, doing what's coming out of your brain? Or because you're bored or you're not thinking, you're just expressing someone else's expression in your own manner? So really think about thinking for yourself. People who pass their lives in reading and acquire their wisdom from books are like those who learn about a country from travel descriptions. They can impart information about a great number of things, but at bottom, they possess no connected, clear, thorough knowledge of what the country is like, because they've never been there. On the other hand, people who have passed their lives in thinking are like those who have visited the country themselves. They alone are really familiar with it, possess connected knowledge of it, and are truly at home in it. A man who thinks for himself is related to this ordinary book philosopher, as an eyewitness is to a historian. The former speaks from his own immediate experience. That is why all men who think for themselves are fundamental agreement. Their differences spring only from their differing standpoints, for they merely express what they have objectively apprehended. The book philosopher, on the contrary, reports what this man has said and that has thought, and the other has objected. Then he compares weights, criticizes these statements, and thus tries to get to the truth of the matter, in which respect he exactly resembles the critical historian. Now, apply that to the here and now. A lot of people watch a lot of people and they start plucking what they say and bounce it off other people. No different. And then some people write books on it. Mere experience is no more a substitute for thinking than reading is. Pure empiricism is related to thinking as eating is to digestion and assimilation. When empiricism boasts that it alone has, through its discoveries, advanced human knowledge. It is as if the mouth should boast that it alone keeps the body alive. The characteristic mark of minds of the first rank is immediacy of all their judgments. Everything they produce is the result of thinking for themselves, and already in the way it is spoken everywhere announces itself as such. He who truly thinks for himself is like a monarch, in that he recognizes no one over him. His judgments, like the decisions of a monarch, arise directly from his own absolute power. He no more accepts authorities than a monarch does orders. He acknowledges the validity, sorry guys, of nothing he has not himself confirmed. In the realm of actuality, however, fair, happy, and pleasant we may find it, we are nonetheless always under the influence of gravity, which we have continually to overcome. In the realm of thought, on the contrary, we are disembodied minds, weightless, and without needs or cares. That is why there is no happiness on earth to compare with that which a beautiful and fruitful mind finds in propitious hour in itself. That's his interesting take on life. Yep. Though he is an optimistic philosopher, believe it or not. It's realistic though. There are very many thoughts which have value for him who thinks them, but only a few of them possess the power of engaging the interest of a reader after they have been written down. Damn, that's good. Yet all the same, only that possesses true value, which you have thought in the first instance for your own instruction. Thinkers can be divided into those who think in the first instance for their own instruction, and for those who do so for the instruction of others. The former are genuine thinkers for themselves in both senses of words. They are the true philosophers. They alone are in earnest. The pleasure and happiness of their existence consists in thinking. The latter are sophists. They want to appear as thinkers and seek their happiness in what they hope thereby to get from others. This is what they are in earnest about. To which of these two classes of men belongs may quickly be seen by his whole style and manner. Lichtenberg is an example of the former class. Herder certainly belongs to the latter. He calls out a lot of philosophers. A lot of them do to each other. When you consider how great and how immediate it is, the problem of existence, this ambiguous, tormented, fleeting, dream-like existence, so great and so immediate that as soon as you are aware of it, it overshadows and obscures all other problems and aims. And when you then see how men, with a few rare exceptions, have no clear awareness of this problem, indeed seem not to be conscious of it at all, but concern themselves with anything rather than with this problem, and live on taking thought only for the day and for a hardly longer span of their own individual future, either expressly refusing to consider this problem or connecting themselves with some system of popular metaphysics. When I say you consider this, you may come to the opinion that man can be called a thinking being only in a very broad sense of that term, and no longer feel much surprise at any thoughtlessness or silliness whatever, but will realize rather that while the intellectual horizon of the normal man is wider than that of an animal, whose whole existence is, as it were, one continual present with no consciousness of past or future, it is not immeasurably wider as is generally supposed. I'm going to leave that there. But his take is very interesting. Very interesting. It's discernment. Thinking for yourself and having discernment. Not following exactly. You can agree with other people's and what they say. But what do you think? Where's your proof? Where's the evidence? It's very hard to like rip this apart without ripping everybody else apart in the here and now. But really, what is your heart singing and saying to you? That's the most important part of the matter. And distinguishing what is written and what you feel here. That's the true heart of the matter. What better than to uplift your spirits with Morgan licking herself? Yeah, you're licking yourself. Little fuzzball. On law and politics. Let's see what he has to say. If you start from the preconceived opinion that the concept of justice must be a positive concept, and then undertake to define it, you won't get very far. It's true. You will be trying to embrace a shadow, pursuing a ghost, looking for a nuance, known as. For the concept of justice is, like that of freedom, a negative concept. Its content is a pure negation. The concept of injustice is the positive one, and means that something as injury, in the broadest sense, that is to say, liasio. Such an injury may affect the person or property or honor. It is accordingly easy to define human rights. Everyone has the right to do anything that does not injure another. Not in this society. Woohoo! You can injure people and get away with it because it depends what narrative you're following. Right, Morgan? Yes? No? To have a right to do something means no more than to be able to do it or take it or use it without thereby injuring anyone. This exposes the meaninglessness of many questions. Whether we have the right to take our own life, for so far as any claims others have upon us are concerned, these are conditional upon our being alive and lapse when this condition lapses. That anyone who no longer wishes to live for himself must go on living merely as a machine for others to use as an extravagant demand. Yeah. Although men possess unequal powers, they nonetheless possess equal rights. Do we now? Rights are not based on powers. Because of the moral nature of justice, they are based on the fact that in each man, the same will to live appears at some stage of its objectivation. Objectivization. Yet this is very valid only in respect of original and abstract rights, which man possesses as man. The property, likewise the honor, which each man has acquired by means of his powers, or in accordance with the measure and the nature of these powers, and then extend the sphere of his rights. It is here that equality therefore ceases. He who is better endowed or more active in this respect extends through his greater acquisitions, not his rights, but only the number of things to which they extend. I have shown in my chief work that the state is essentially no more than an institution for the protection of the whole against attacks from without, and the protection of its individual members from attacks by one another. It follows that the necessity for the state ultimately depends on the acknowledged injustice of the human race. Without this, no one would ever have thought of the state, since no one would have needed to fear any encroachment on his rights. And a mere union against attacks of wild animals or the elements would bear only a right similarly to a state. From this point of view, it is easy to see the ignorance and triviality of these philosophers who, in pompous phrases, represent the state as the supreme goal and greatest achievement of mankind, and thereby achieve an apotheosis of Philistinism. Yeah, there's a lot of words I can't project. I'm sorry, guys. Apotheosis. I got it out. That's what I say to my mouth. If justice ruled on earth, it would be sufficient to have built one's house. It would require no further protection than this manifest right of possession. But because injustice is the order of the day, whoever built the house must also be positioned to protect it. Otherwise, his rights is de facto defective, for the assailant has on his side force majeure, which is actually Spinoza's concept of justice. He recognizes no other right, but says, French that I can't read. Hang on. A person's rights are equivalent to his power. The rights of a person are determined by his power. In civil life, to be sure, this concept of justice has been abolished in practice as well as in theory, but in political life, it has been abolished only in theory. In practice, it continues to prevail. The difference between serfdom, as in Russia, and landed property, as in England, and that the serf and the tenant, occupier, mortgager, in general, lies more in the form than the content. It makes little essential difference to me whether I own the peasant or the land he works, the bird or its food, the fruit or the tree. As Shylock says, you take my life. When you do, take the means whereby I live. The free peasant has, of course, the advantage that he can leave and go off into the wide world, but the serf has this perhaps greater advantage, that when there is a bad harvest, or when he is sick or old or incapable, his master has to take care of him. Poverty and slavery are thus only two forms of, one might almost say, two words for the same thing, the essence of which is that a man's energies are expended for the most part not on his own behalf, but on that of others. The outcome being partly that he is overloaded with work, partly that he needs a very inadequate net, that his needs are very adequately met. It's 2022. The question of sovereignty of the people amounts at bottom to the question whether anyone could have the natural right to rule a people against its will. I cannot see how that question could be answered affirmatively. It is therefore a fact that the people is sovereign, but this sovereignty never comes of age and therefore has to remain under the permanent care of a guardian. It can never exercise its rights itself without giving rise to limitless dangers, especially as, like all minors, it is easily fooled by cunning impostors who are therefore called demagogues. Voltaire says the first king was a successful soldier. All princes were no doubt, in fact, originally victorious commanders, and for a long time ruled as such. Having acquired standing armies, they regarded the people as a means of feeding themselves and their soldiers, that is to say, as a herd which one looks after so that it may provide wool, milk, and meat. This is based on the fact that by nature and from the first, it is not justice which rules on earth, but force, as will be more fully discussed in the following section. Force has the advantage of the primus occupans, which is why it can never be annulled or really abolished from the world. It must always be appealed to, and the most that one can hope for is that it will stand on the side of justice. Consequently, what the prince says is, I rule over you by force. To do that, I must exclude every other force, for I will not suffer any other force to stand beside mine, neither that which comes from without, nor that of one against another within. So learn to be content with force. It is precisely because this claim was made good that in time something quite different evolved out of a kingship, and the old conception of it stepped into the background. It was replaced by the conception of a national father, and the king became the firm, unshakable pillar on which alone the entire legal order and thus rights of all repose and continue to exist. But he can perform this role only by virtue of the inborn prerogative, which bestows upon him and only him an authority above every other, which cannot be doubted or consented, and which indeed every one obeys as if instinct. Thus he is rightly called by the grace of God, and is at all times the most useful person in the state, whose services cannot be rewarded too highly by any civil list, no matter how costly. Justice is in itself powerless. What rules by nature is force. To draw this over on the side of justice, so that by means of force justice rules. That is the problem of statecraft, and it is certainly a hard one. How hard will you realize if you consider what boundless egoism reposes in almost every human beast, and that it is many millions of individuals so constituted who have to be kept within the bounds of peace, order, and legality. This being so, it is a wonder the world is on the whole peaceful, law abiding as we see it to be, which situation, however, is brought about only by the machinery of the state, for the only thing that can produce an immediate effect is physical force, since this is the only thing which men, as they generally are, understand and respect. Prima, the press is to the machinery of the state what the safe valve is to the steam engine. Let's read that again. Freedom of the press is to the machinery of the state what the safety valve is to the steam engine. Every discontent is by means of its immediately relieved in words. Indeed, unless this discontent is very considerable, it exhausts itself in this way. If, however, it is very considerable, it is as well known of it in time so as to redress it. On the other hand, however, freedom of the press must be regarded as a permit to sell poison. Damn. Poison of the mind and poison of the heart. For what cannot be put into the heads of the ignorant and courteous masses, especially if you hold before them the prospect of gain and advantages. And of what misdeeds is man not capable? One something has been put in its head. I very much fear, therefore, that the dangers of press freedom outweigh its usefulness, especially where there are legal remedies available for all grievances. In any event, however, freedom of the press should be conditional upon the strictest prohibition of any kind of anonymity. Boom. Boom. A constitution embodying nothing but abstract justice would be a wonderful thing, but it would not be suited to beings such as men, because the great majority of men are in the highest degree egotistic, unjust, inconsiderable, deceitful, sometimes even malicious, and equipped moreover with more mediocrity and intelligence. There exists the need for a completely unaccountable power consecrated in one man and standing above even justice and the law, before which everything bows and which is regarded as being of a higher order, a sovereign by the grace of God. Only thus can mankind in the long run be curbed and ruled. Now, just note that this is way before a lot of things in time and space. I'm trying to think when this, I'm trying to see where this is written. I don't think this has an actual date that I'm gonna find at the moment. Okay, but just to put it in the mind sense, he was born in Danzig in February 1788, and he died in Frankfurt in September of 1860. So this was probably done in the 1800s. So a lot of things did not come to pass and things were different in Europe. So his perspective is more of a monarchical king, queen, ruler. So just put that, when we're reading a lot of the philosophy, you have to throw yourself back into the time that they lived to understand their thinking, which is way different from ours now. But just put it in perspective of his projections and perceptions of this time. But that freedom of press is hands down. The monarchical form of government is the form most natural to man. How could it possibly happen that universally at all times, many millions, even hundreds of millions of us men have subjected ourselves to and willingly obeyed one man, occasionally even a woman, or provisionally a child, if there were not in man a monarchical instinct which drives him to it as to the condition most appropriate to him? For this does not proceed from reflection. Everywhere one man is king, and his dignity is, as a rule, Hereditary. He is, as it were, the personification or monogram of the whole people, which in him acquires individuality. In this sense, he can justly say, I can't read, I want to try to read French, but that's not going to come out properly, so I do apologize. It is for precisely this reason that Shakespeare's histories, the kings of England and France, refer to one another as England and France, and the Duke of Austria in King John is referred as Austria. It is as though they regarded themselves as incarnations of their nationalities. This is in accord with human nature, and is precisely why the hereditary monarch cannot divorce his own and his family's welfare from that of his country, which is what elected monarchs usually do, as witness the Papal States. Republics are anti-natural. That's why America was the first, maybe. Artificial and derived from reflection. Consequently, there are also very few of them in the entire history of mankind, namely Little Greek republics and the Roman and Carthaginian republics. And these were all made possible by the fact that 5/6, perhaps even 7/8 of their population consisted of slaves. The case is similar in the United States of North America. In the year 1840, of a population of 16 million, 3 millions were slaves. The duration of the republics of antiquity was moreover very brief compared with that of the monarchies. Republics are in general easy to establish but hard to maintain. Precisely the opposite is true of monarchies. If you want utopian planes, I would say the only solution to the problem is the despotism of the wise and noble members of a genuine aristocracy, a genuine nobility, achieved by mating the most magnanimous men with the cleverest and most gifted women. This proposal constitutes my utopia and my Platonic republic. Oh, that's good. Woo! People have always been disconnected with governments, laws, and public institutions for the most part. However, this has been only because they have been ready to blame them for the wretchedness which pertains to human existence as such. But this misrepresentation has never been put forward in more deceitful and imprudent a fashion than it is by the demagogues of the present day. As enemies of Christianity, they are optimists, and according to them, the world is an end in itself, and thus it is natural constitution on an altogether splendid structure, a regular abode of bliss. The colossal evil of the world, which cries against this idea, they attribute entirely to governments. If this would only do their duty, there would be a heaven on earth. We could all, without work or effort, cram ourselves, swill, propagate, and drop dead, for this is a paraphrase of their end in itself, and the goal of the unending progress of mankind, which is pompous phrases they never weary of proclaiming. My goodness. I love him. I do. He's hilarious. He makes me laugh. This is why his work really saved me. Um, big time. Oh boy. I have inappropriate drawings of male models. Okay, I just got this. I'm gonna probably read this on the next one, but in such a world where no stability of any kind, no enduring state is possible, where everything is involved in restless change and confusion and keeps itself on its tightrope only by continually striding forward. In such a world, happiness is not so much as to be thought of. I highlighted that. For if life, in the desire for which our essence and existence consists, possessed in itself a positive value and real content, there would be no such thing as boredom. Mere existence would fulfill and satisfy us. I love him. So maybe next time I will read On the Suffering of the World, which he wrote a book and I did a video way back in the day about it. And maybe the antithesis of things in itself and appearance. He tackles religion in here, but because their mode of thinking was different from ours. But I hope you got something out of that. I really enjoy his work. As I'm finishing like 2 books, because the Key of Destiny will be finished the next time I read it, and the Kabbalion Sun, I'm trying to figure other like not long work, but I gotta find a copy of this Beauty, because I think it's really important to understand where we are in our world. Genius work. Not to say the Communist Manifesto is a genius work, but it kind of gives us a blueprint of what's happening right now, which is why I'm doing what I'm doing. There are people out there already tackling the politics. There are people out there really exposing the aliens and the galactic fun. There are other people out there just exposing like the crazy movie that we're all in. People are decoding our reality. Literally. I'm trying to bring that all together through the books that I'm reading to kind of make sense out of what's going on now. I'm reading a lot of these books I read 20 years ago, some of them a little less, but still in the range of 20 years ago, and putting it in the sense of now. We're going through the hermit's journey. Many of us are alone. Many of us have very few and far between connections to other people. I want to bridge that gap. So I did I'm still going to do the hermit series with this gem. And I'm not going to read the whole book. I'm going to do sections that apply, that are profound. But just like the occult work that is very necessary, and again, occult, hidden things, hidden meanings, secret societies hid things because they didn't want it to be ruined. the Inquisition happening, the Council of Nicaea happened, things were like tweaked and like, sorry, you can't preach like that anymore, and you can't talk about God like that anymore, and you can't talk about Yeshua that way, because nope, we're telling you what to say and how to preach it, and that's it. And that's basically the Council of Nicaea. Go look it up. I implore you to. There's a lot of things in history they don't tell you about, and how things have been manipulated. The script was written a very long time ago. And now it's up to us to untangle those things, make sense out of it, and learn from it so it doesn't repeat again. Because I don't want to have to go through this again. Our grandkids, future humanity does not need to step into this bullshit again. Sorry, they don't. There's a lot of people out there doing really good work. Form your own conclusions, your own perceptions, discern, read it for yourself. You know, although this old man, grumpy old man, in most of his pictures, he's a grumpy old man. He was grumpy. But he too, in many of his books, read everybody else and then cited their work in his work. And but he had his own critical thinking, and he had his own thoughts. He had his own perceptions. And then he threw everything together and made hypothesis about what he was going through, exploring, and looking into. So, I mean, he was thinking for himself, but he cited other people and then criticized them heavily. And I think a lot of people don't credit his work as much because of that. It's all perception. It's not right or wrong. But he brings up a lot of good points. That's why I like him. I don't agree with everything he says either, but a lot of what he questions and topics that he tackles is worth noting and worth going over. There's not too many people thinking for themselves. They're thinking what other people are thinking, and they're not really going in. There are people who can't think for themselves because they allow other things to dictate to them how to feel. Television. We all know those people. Stuck and glued to the television. Well, the expert said, well, where did you read that? Oh, no, I heard it on the television. How do you know that they're experts? You know those drug commercials with the actor doctor telling you, oh, yeah, this drug causes cancer and this, that, and the other thing. Oh, but that's an actor. That's not really a PhD, MD. That nurse is an actress. They're hired to make those commercials. Does that make it the absolute end all be all? You know, we go to doctors, we get sick, and sometimes we don't like, something doesn't sit right with us when the doctor tells us something. So we go get a second opinion, or a third, or a fourth. Right? Because we are just listening to their opinions on what might be going on with you, but only you know what resonates with you. So if what they're saying is not clicking with you, guess what? You're going to go to another person to see what they think and see if that meshes and jives with you, because you want to get the best possible outcome when you're sick. You want to be healed. I would hope so. But when it comes to watching TV and getting the media and the propaganda, that's all you're being spewed is propaganda. On any or all sides. The programming is programming you to think, feel, and assert in a certain way. True. Go read the patents. A lot of these works are referring to the past, but when you apply it to the here and now, has our world really been run by monarchs the whole time and it's just a guise? I say yes. Different titles, same bullshit. We can govern ourselves. We just need better policies. We all need to come together. And I hope soon we'll be able to do that. But I got a spark of inspiration to go find these books because I think it's necessary, and Spirit does too, to come and explore them. So I hope you enjoyed this. Sending each and every one of you love and light. I hope you have a really fantastic evening and weekend, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye, guys.